We use the help of mantras. In the Chandipat, it's actually said that the goddess resides in mantras. So there's a passage from the Chandipat which says, Jnananam chinmayatita shunyanam sunya sakshini yashya parataram nasti saisa durga prakritita. O goddess, you reside in all mantras in the form of letters, and in all words in the form of wisdom and meaning. In wisdom you reside as the bliss of consciousness, and in silence you reside as the ultimate silence beyond, which no greater exists. There you are known by the name of the reliever of difficulties. So I wanted to just, Serena, if you would just pull up the Bhairavi Yantra for a second. I'll just share with you this visual, because in India the goddess is shown in so many, many forms. When we first started, as you all came in from the waiting room, there was a beautiful painting actually made by my friend Kate Rabinowitz, and I wanted to share that with you while you were listening to the song of the water song, which Serena put the translation and the words in the chat. But this is another image made by my friend Sarah, who does yantra work. And this particular one calls to me so much. It's the yantra for Bhairavi. And she is the warrior goddess of speech. She is the word in its unarticulated and primal form as raw energy. Bhairavi is the woman as warrior, who with her power of divine speech and spiritual fire eliminates all obstacles to the unfolding of true awareness. She dwells in the base of the spine. Her mantra is swaha, meaning self-offering. Self-offering. Our inner worship of Bhairavi involves offering all our thoughts and emotions into the fire of the divine word, which dwells in the root chakra. This is to withdraw the mind from the senses and sink into the deepest part of our being. It is to let our speech sink from the throat to the base of the spine, to merge into the light of silence. So these are just a few different aspects of the goddess I wanted to share with you before we start our program today. And I'm going to start with a little invocation. The words for this, Serena will share in the chat. It comes from a prayer to Narayani. And I'd like to ask everybody also to just make sure your mics are muted, please. We will have a chance to unmute them later. During the Q&R, I'll explain to you at that point how to raise hands and ask questions. So Serena, is the reverb off now or on now?
It sounds like it's on.
It's on?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the chant that we're going to sing, the words for it are sarva mangala shive sarvārtha sādhike sharanye tryambake gauri nārāyani namo stute. So Narayani is the consort or the feminine aspect of Vishnu, who is the sustainer and the balancer of all creation. But without her, nothing would happen. So she, Narayani, is his Shakti, his feminine aspect. She symbolizes auspiciousness. Auspiciousness helps us to recognize that all that happens within our lives is the universe acting on our behalf, as difficult as sometimes might be. Prostrations to you, O Narayani, who bestows auspiciousness. May we take refuge in you, O three-eyed goddess. Sarva mangala shive sarvārtha sādhike sharanye tryambake gauri nārāyani namo stute sarva mangala shive sarvārtha sādhike sharanye tryambake gauri nārāyani namo stute sarva mangala shive sarvārtha sādhike sharanye tryambake gauri nārāyani namo stute Narayani namo stute Narayani namo stute. Mirabai. Can you unmute yourself?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Nina. That was so beautiful. Every word that came from you and the invocation. Thank you so much. What an honor to gather with you, Nina, my sister, and all of you again. Some of you for the first time. I have to say, Kate Rabinowitz, who did that beautiful painting, is also my friend, our friend, and I love that the work that's coming out of her during this time. So many of the feminine mystics of all traditions, including those of us who are literally physically gathered together right now, or virtually gathered on this this space, in this virtual space, are responding to the upheaval of the world with incredible creativity right now. Have you found that in yourself and in others? I don't think that's an accident. I think that the soul of the world is speaking through us right now and expressing itself in wildly creative ways. Because the ways we used to do things, the kind of more mechanistic, fix the broken gizmo approach, hasn't been working. It's requiring a radical reprioritizing of what matters, and creativity, which is the domain of the feminine for those of us of any gender. The creative response seems to be rising to this, to breaking through right now as a portal to reweaving the broken world. So we offer you this little drink of water in the desert of these crazy times, and may the benefit of our practice together today be dedicated to all beings, and very specifically to some particular conservation projects that Nina has very carefully curated for us. So on the wings of the sound of the mantra that Nina has just shared with us, I'd like to just do a few minutes of contemplative practice to root us into our bodies and our breath. So I'd like to start by lighting this candle. Invoking sacred space, which has already been invoked so beautifully. And with this candle, we call upon the ancestors, the unseen beings who guide us and support us as we navigate the most turbulent spaces of the human predicament. Now, as the veils are thinnest, according to the indigenous traditions around the world, we have more access than ever to the invisible realms, to the unseen beings, to the ancestors who are always available to us, who are always unconditionally loving and supportive, but whose presence we often forget about. And it's as if during this time of the great moon, this blue moon cycle, this leading up to Dia de los Muertos in the indigenous traditions of North America, which is a kind of a blend of both the indigenous American traditions and also the mystical Catholic traditions. And the Celtic tradition also, this is a sacred time. There is this recognition that our loved ones who have crossed over to the other world come back and are led back to this world with trails of marigolds and the ringing of bells and the offering of shrines and altars, ofrendas, that honor the ancestors with pictures and flowers and candles and their favorite foods and drinks and objects. So if you haven't already done so, and you're interested in doing this with reverence and respect for the traditions from which they arise, then perhaps you can create in the next day or so an ofrenda, an altar of some sort to your loved ones who have passed, to welcome them back to this realm where the threshold is very porous right now. They can dip in and out. We can dip over there and back here. Maybe you're already experiencing that in your dreams and meditations, that sense of the transparency between the worlds. or translucence. I remember when Ramdas was dying and I talked to Nina on the phone and she said, it was maybe a couple of weeks before he died, she said, he's just becoming translucent. It's different than transparent. It's just like shunyata is not empty, it's boundlessness. So there is this translucence where the light that illumines the space between the worlds is more palpable. And so we're going to just sit for a couple of minutes in the quiet. And I invite you to invite them, the loved ones, the ancestors of our genetic lineages and the lineage holders of our spiritual traditions, to call upon them now to be with us, to see us through this time of confusion and bewilderment and exhaustion that maybe some of us are grappling with as we lead up to the election in the US, as we grapple with the ongoing effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and the liminal space of not knowing that we're being asked to abide in. So I'm going to ring the bell and lead you into the stillness for just a couple of minutes. Prayer to the Great Mother. Love song to the Great Mother. Beloved one, our sister, Mother Earth, sacred woman, holy girl, crucible of mercy and fire of truth, thank you. We have called you and you have come. You descend on the wings of pain, the wings of joy, bringing solace and vitality. You rise through the roots of the trees, spreading shelter, offering refuge. You enter through the cries of the young, demanding protection for the vulnerable. Even as we bow before your beautiful body, you affirm the beauty of our bodies. You bless every particle of creation with your divine presence. We welcome you, who have lived long enough in exile, to dwell among us again. We offer ourselves as your loving stewards, your beloved reluctant prophets, radiant reflections of your own sacred self. Thank you. Thank you. And again, we give thanks. Nina.
Thank you, Mirabai.
You're welcome.
So I just need a little check here. Can you help me with this? Tell me if you're hearing reverb now or not. So I'm going to speak like this. And then I'm going to speak like this. This has reverb?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Daniel. I see you. Okay, great. I had a little bit of a light on. Which way is it? Okay. So, Sarina, if you would please share the image of Tara 12. We're going to chant some mantras together. And this is a particular one that I learned, which is one of the 21 Taras that you see in a number of different Buddhist lineages. So, Sarina, I don't actually see the image of Tara. I'm just seeing a black screen at the moment. If you can't get it, it's okay.
Yeah, sorry. Just 1 second.
Sure.
I don't know why it paused.
So they say that the mantras that we hear are actually transmissions of sound from the elements, air, water, fire, earth, that come through the ether, through the sacred space. And the more I chant, the more I feel that the entire universe is made up of mantra. That's how it feels to me. And the more we chant the mantras, the more we can connect to these elements. So, Serena, don't worry about the image if you can't get it.
Nina, I shared it. I thought do you not see it?
It's not on the screen. So don't worry about it. It's okay. If everyone would just take a look at the chat, so you can unshare your screen. If everyone can take a look at the chat, Serena has posted these words of Om Tare Tu Tare Ture Mangalam Shri Mahapani Swaha. So I'm going to show this to you just because this might be the easiest way to do this right now. So there is Tara with her one leg touching the earth, ready to jump into action. The other one close up to her body in a meditative pose. And her hand on her knee bestowing grace and blessings to everyone. And on top of the utpala flower in her other hand is the infinity knot. And this particular Tara is invoked. Her name in the Tibetan tradition is Drolma Tashi Donjema. And she's golden yellow in color. She brings about timely seasons, healthy children, and balance to the elements. So this mantra has been calling to me for a long time. And the words for it again are Om Tare Tu Tare Ture Mangalam Shri Mahapani Swaha. So again, the word Mangalam brings about auspiciousness. So let's just chant this together for a few minutes and really start to feel into the mantra. And just like any mantra, the more we chant the mantra, we invoke the presence that the mantra invokes. And we are able to enter into that space, and we enable our space to be infused with that presence of the mantra. Mangalam Shri Mahapani Swaha. Om Tare Tu Re. 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 Mangalam tu tare tu re. Mangalam Shri Mahapani Swaha. Om 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 tare tu re. Mangalam Shri Mahapani Swaha. Hear your own voice. Om tare tu re. Mangalam Shri Mahapani Swaha. 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 last time together. Om tare tu re, mangalam shri mahapani swaha. Om tare tu re, mangalam shri mahapani swaha. Mirabai.
Thank you, Nina. So I'd like to share a little bit about Hildegard of Bingen. Saint Hildegard. She's finally been canonized by the Catholic Church after 1,000 years of being considered to be a saint by the people. Sometimes it takes the institutions run by dudes a little bit of time to catch up with what we already know. Eventually, maybe the institutions will catch up with the fact that we're all saints and we're all gurus and we're all awakened beings in drag, as Ram Dass would say. So I want to just take a few minutes to tell you a story about the life of this person. You know, a lot of the lives of the saints and masters are legends, and who knows what really happened and what didn't. But what we know about Hildegard, I mean, I guess what I want to say about Hildegard is that she spent the first half of her life repressing the voice of wisdom and truth and love because it didn't fit the established, accepted boundaries of the way things were supposed to be and how people were supposed to behave. And it was only when she was practically dead from trying to fit herself into the boxes that society had prepared for her that finally what she called the living light broke through and insisted that she write and paint and sing the messages of love that were coursing through her. And once she surrendered to that, she rose radiant from her sickbed, she says, and the rest of her life was spent in this kind of passionate sharing of what was coming through her in the form of wisdom and information and cosmology and these illuminations, these painted images that were quite extraordinary and revolutionary and didn't fit. Here, let's see, I'll just pick one at random. Didn't necessarily fit the established theological constructs of her time. And I feel like in our time, structures are collapsing all around us. The way we thought things were supposed to be aren't holding up in the mystery of what is. And yet what will be hasn't fully formed yet. And what will be is up to us. And so it's almost like this period of sheltering in place. Not all of us have the privilege of being able to be home and safe and make a living. But there is this movement toward innerness right now. is giving us the opportunity to strengthen ourselves, to be able to be a source of strength for others going forward, but also is allowing us to abide in this mysterious liminal realm where we don't have to know what to do or what is to come, but we get to be with the mystery without as many distractions as we might have had in the past. Meanwhile, things are crumbling and igniting and falling down and burning. And so we are invited to sit with that and to see what arises in us as a creative response moving forward. So Hildegard was born in the 12th century, the beginning of the 12th century, and died at the end of the 12th century in the Rhineland Valley, what is now known as Germany. And it was a very lush and verdant place. That's important in Hildegard's story, as landscape is important in all of our story. I live in the high desert of northern New Mexico, and this landscape is in my bones. I was actually born in Brooklyn, but and when I go back to New York, sometimes I can feel that sense of belonging to that land that's deep beneath the buildings and the cement. But I also, having grown up mostly in New Mexico, it's this high desert is woven in with the cells of my body and my breath. So Hildegard was very much of that verdant Rhineland Valley. She was the 10th child of 10 children, and the ancient indigenous tradition of her time that had been woven in to the Roman Catholic colonial tradition, we'll call it, was that the 10th of 10 children, 10th child of 10 children, would be a tithe to the church, would be offered back to the church. And so Hildegard was offered back. From the time she was born, it was known that she would be given at some point to the church and given over to the religious life. And she was a very kind of ethereal, magical child. From an early age, like 3, she started having visions and being able to see things before they happened, to know things. I mean, it started off with naming the exact markings of a calf that was being born to the family cow, and then knowing when someone was going to die. There were things that this little girl knew that she wasn't supposed to know, and she made the adults around her quite nervous with this skill of hers, and she could see that it scared them, which scared her because she needed to depend on them. And so she sort of pulled back and kept her visions to herself as a result of suppressing her knowingness. See if this resonates with any of you. She began to get sick. She was a sickly child because she kept trying to shape herself to the expectations of the world around her and denying her own gifts. Finally, at the age of around 8 or 9, she was sent to live with a distant relative, Jutta, who was an anchoress. That is, Jutta lived in seclusion in an anchor hold attached to a church up in the hills of this Rhineland region. And Jutta spent all of her days in prayer and contemplation and singing the Psalms. And Hildegard apprenticed with her and learned to read in Latin and learned to memorize the Psalms and learned all the other things like sewing and who knows, whatever girls were expected to learn that nobody ever taught me, by the way. I don't know about you. And Jutta, finally, I think when Hildegard was around 18, she took vows. She professed vows as a religious woman, and Jutta died soon after, and Hildegard was expected to take her place as the abbess of this small community. So they were no longer just enclosed, the two of them. They had gathered a collection of young women because their reputation for spiritual awakeness and joy had spread, and other women wanted to come live with them and sing with them and pray with them. And so Hildegard stepped into, kind of against her will, running the joint. and became more and more sort of adept and skilled in religious life, but interiorly was feeling kind of dry and empty. Like so many mystics of different traditions, right around the age of 40, something shifted. Has that happened to any of you? Some of you are not yet 40. Some of you may look back on right around that threshold, 37, 38, 42, 43, where something in you breaks open. For me, yeah, I would say it's right around 40, and it was precipitated by the death of my daughter, but it definitely shifted my interior life radically by shattering it, essentially. So it's not always related to circumstances, but somehow something often that has been pushed to the side will no longer be able to be buried in it, and it breaks through. So for Hildegard, it was this sickness that I referred to, and she finally heard the kind of bellowing of of spirit in the form of what she called the living light. Get up and write down what I'm going to tell you. Prophet Muhammad was around. Actually, he was around 40 when he had actually, I'm not going to use him as an example. Saint Teresa of Avila. I know her really well. She was around 40 when she had what's called her second conversion experience of running into a statue of Christ being scourged at the pillar in the hallway of the convent. Almost stumbled over this religious statue, and then caught his eye, and suddenly saw this unconditional love intermingled with suffering in his face and his countenance, and it broke her open. She also, like Hildegard, had spent many years in aridity and dryness and up to that point. And so Hildegard finally was able to express what was rising up in her, and she became what's known as a polymath, or a Renaissance woman before the Renaissance. She became a healer. The secrets of the stones, she said, spoke to her. The living light spoke to her through these minerals and gems and precious and semi-precious stones that she realized had healing properties. And then the herbs began to speak to her, and she began to understand the healing properties of all the plants in her region. And finally actually developed an apothecary and a clinic and a hospice. So people came to be healed, but people also came to be accompanied in their dying. She was a preacher. She spoke truth to power. She spoke to bishops and archbishops, to the Pope himself, and they listened to her. She spoke to the people who led the Crusades and said, there's another way, there's a nonviolent way to spread the message of Christ's love and peace in this world without violence, with respect for the other. She was a musician. That was the main probably gift of Hildegard, was these incredible songs that came through her that are still taught. From ear to heart is the method, they say. From ear to heart is the way that people learn Hildegard's music, rather than through tabulation and writing it down. So if you haven't already heard Hildegard's music, please check it out. It's all over. You can find it all over the internet. I guess I want to end Hildegard's story for now, and then I'll do some readings at some point, by telling you that when she was in her elder years, she had already founded numerous convents and, let's call them, communities for women, where the primary practice was kirtan, was chanting, was singing, was sacred song. This was what wove together the basket of Hildegard's beautiful communities along this Rhineland Valley. And toward the end of her life, there was a young man who was drawn to the sisters who lived in these communities, especially to Hildegard, to Mother Hildegard, and often came to visit with them and to soak in their brilliance and their wisdom and their music. And he was a revolutionary. And so he had been excommunicated for his revolutionary activities. And then he was wounded in battle and was dying. And he found his way to Hildegard's community, or he was brought to Hildegard's community, where he died and he had asked to be buried there. And so they buried him in the convent cemetery because they loved this young man and he loved them. When the bishop heard about this, he insisted that they exhume the body because the young man was a revolutionary and and therefore a sinner. And Hildegard insisted that he had made his peace with God before he died, and they refused to dig him up, and in fact disguised his grave so that they couldn't come and get him. But as punishment for Hildegard's subversive behavior, the bishop ordered an interdiction, which is a punishment. And the punishment was that the sisters could no longer sing. They couldn't sing the divine hours, and they couldn't receive communion, the Eucharist, which was so deeply dear to them, to receive the body of Christ. So the two things they loved most, communion and singing, were taken from them. Hildegard fought it with every breath in her body, and mostly just threatened and said, anyone who silences music will go to a place after they die where there's no music. That was like the worst thing she could imagine. And finally, I think that did it. And the interdict was lifted, and they were allowed to sing again and to receive communion again. But Hildegard was so depleted from the battle that she died a few months afterwards. So I'm just going to read you a few things from Hildegard and then pass it back to Nina.
Take your time, Mirabai. Take your time.
Okay, thanks. So this is one of the voices of the living light to Hildegard that she wrote down. I, the highest and fiery power, have kindled every spark of life. I, the fiery life of divine essence, am a flame beyond the beauty of meadows. I gleam in the waters. I burn in the sun, the moon, and the stars. With every breeze, as with the invisible life that contains everything, I awaken everything to life. The air lives by turning green and being in bloom. The waters flow as if they were alive. The sun lives in its light. The moon is enkindled after its disappearance once again by the light of the sun, so that the moon is again revived. And so I remain hidden in every kind of reality as a fiery power. Everything burns because of me, in the way our breath constantly moves us, like the wind-tossed flame in fire. Hildegard coined a term, viriditas, which is the greening energy of all of life. It's God's greening energy, animating, that moves through everything. This is panentheism. It's the understanding that every particle of creation is imbued with the sacred who transcends as well as penetrates and permeates all that is. So viriditas, the greening energy of the divine, is central to understanding Hildegard, as is the Divine Mother. Hildegard kind of casually, joyously combines Mother Earth, Mother Wisdom, Sophia, and Mother Mary. Sometimes Mother Mary is the goddess who is responsible for creating all of life, which is counter to the teachings of Holy Mother Church. So she finds ways to disguise her theology of the motherhood of God in such a way that it aligns with dogma, but it's also what kept her from being recognized by the church for so long, because she's so rooted in the indigenous goddess traditions of Europe. So they're all the same for her. Mother wisdom, the highest form of the expression of the divine, and Mother Mary, Mother of God, but God herself, and Mother Earth, who weaves everything into being with her breath, sometimes with her sweat. So I'm going to read a couple more things, and I ask you to listen to these with your heart as a contemplative listening. 78. O fire of the Holy Spirit, life of the life of all living beings, you are wholly sacred. You give shape to all forms. O most courageous path, penetrating all places, the heights of the heavens, the contours of the earth, the depths of every abyss. You gather everything together and safely bind it. Clouds spin out from you. Air unfolds from you. Stones derive their temperaments from you. Rivers spring forth from your waters, and earth exudes her green vitality. All that the earth issues forth is connected and bound to God. The earth is at the same time mother. She is the mother of all, for contained in her are the seeds of all. The earth of humankind contains all moistness, all verdancy, all germinating power. It is in so many ways fruitful. All the other parts of creation come from it. Yet it forms not only the basic raw material for humankind, but also substance for the incarnation of God. O highest wisdom, who circles the great circle, who envisions the whole world as one living path, you have 3 wings. One soars above the sky. Another moistens the ground with sweat, while the third flies everywhere at once. O wisdom, we sing your praise. One more. O wise woman, O lovely and loving mother, you are the ground of all being. We greet you as children. O wise woman, O luminous mother, we want you to plead for us, for our lives, for our radiance, to ask for that same sweet shining that you have. The seed that sprouted from your womb bore delicious fruit that feeds us. We are the guests in this feast of joy. O Mother Wisdom, so greatly does God delight in you, So enthralled is God with you that he has sunk deep within you the fire of true love, and your body, complete with ecstasy, resounds with the full symphony of heaven. Do you want a little more, Nina, or do you want to weave into chanting?
Do some more.
Okay. I'm going to read you a couple of Hildegard's injunctions about meddling with the earth and screwing up our stewardship agreements that all humans made before we were born to steward our beloved Mother Earth. God loans all of creation to humankind for our use. The high, the low, everything. If we misuse this privilege, God's justice gives creation permission to offer humankind a reminder. I think I'll read that again. God loans all of creation to humankind for our use. The high, the low, everything. If we misuse this privilege, God's justice gives creation permission to offer humankind a reminder. And then in another passage, she says, do not denigrate anything God has created. All creation is simple, plain, and good. And God is present throughout creation. Why do you even consider things beneath your notice? God's justice is to be found in every detail of what she has made. The human race alone is incapable of injustice. Human beings alone are capable of disobeying God's laws because they try to be wiser than God. The rest of creation cries out against the evil and perversity of the human species. Other creatures fulfill the commandments of God. They honor God's laws. And other creatures do not grumble or complain about those laws. But human beings rebel against those laws, defying them in word and action. And in doing so, they inflict terrible cruelty on the rest of God's creation. Can you believe it? 12th century. I don't know, we just didn't listen. So I'll end this with some comforting words that Hildegard wrote to one of the sisters that was having a hard time. That maybe there will be something in here that will help you if you find yourself in difficulty right now. I know I have been. It's why I am so fucking grateful for spaces like this, where we can lay down the burdens on our hearts for a few minutes and replenish our energy and restore our hearts when we need it most. This is available to us. We forget, but there's so many ways to connect in these fragmented times where the gifts of our ancestors are vitally available and relevant right now. So I'll close my Hildegard teaching with this letter to her, one of her sisters. So, O daughter, the world is in flux. Listen now, O my anxious daughter. The arrogant deception of the ancient serpent sometimes wearies those persons inspired by God. For whenever that serpent, you can replace this arcane religious language with whatever works for you. Whenever that serpent sees a fine jewel, he hisses and says, "What is this?" And he wearies that jewel with the many afflictions that distress a blazing mind, longing to soar above the clouds as if they were gods, just as he himself once did. Listen again. Those who long to complete God's work must always bear in mind that we are fragile vessels, for we are only human. We can only sing the mysteries of God like a trumpet, which only returns a sound, but cannot function unassisted. For it is another who breathes into it, that it might give forth a sound. O my daughter, may God make you a mirror of life. I too cower at the puniness of my mind, and am greatly wearied by anxiety and fear. Yet, from time to time, I resound a little, like the dim sound of a trumpet from the living light.
Before you mute yourself, Mirabai, people are asking where you're reading from. So can you just share that, please?
Yes. So this is a little book I put together, I think in 2007 or 8. It was published by Sounds True. And it's from a series I did on 6 different Christian mystics. And so it's simply called Hildegard of Bingen, and the series is called Devotions, Prayers, and Living Wisdom. I'll stick that in the chat. Thanks for asking.
That is just unbelievably beautiful. I think the part that really got me is how we grumble. We're the only ones who grumble. So I just want to grumble about our grumbling.
Dukkha, dukkha.
While I was listening to you telling us the story of Hildegard, I was thinking about a version of the Ramayana, because one of my favorite things to do is to read as many versions of the Ramayana as I can get my hands on. And I have time to read. One of them, this one that I'm reading now, is actually written by a woman, an American woman, who had an experience, an actual a transmission of a sort. She had an experience where she basically heard and is telling the story of the Ramayana from the point of view of Sita, which doesn't happen very much in the traditional texts that we've seen. And as you said before, Mirabai, many of the stories are told from the point of view, from the male point of view, and it's therefore written and spoken in a certain way. I'm sure those of you who know the story of the Ramayana understand that she's a key being or character in the story. Nothing would happen if it weren't for the fact that she was there, and certain things happened to her, the main one being that she was abducted by Ravana, who was considered a massive demon that had to be overcome. But what they don't talk about, and you kind of have to glean it from what you're reading, is that in fact Sita was born from the earth. That's how she arrives as the daughter of King Janak. And King Janak himself was an enlightened king. He could, just like the Tara image that I showed you before, he had one foot in the world and the other foot was in full alignment with the divine. So he could do both things at the same time. And Sita was his daughter. And in fact, they say in this version that I'm reading, which I'm so happy to read, and I will share it with you later, is that Sita in fact learned everything about taking care of people from her father, who took care of his own people from his kingdom, Mithila. And from a very young age, while you were telling the story of Hildegard, it was reminding me of this story. She was found to be in communion with nature from a very young age, and so much so she was fully absorbed in it. And it would happen to her when she would sit by the riverside, and she actually was speaking to the river, the Sarayu, as the goddess, and she would get her cues from there. She would also spend time in the forest, and she would collect herbs and plants, and she was able to recognize their medicinal properties very early on in life. And so, as the story of the Ramayana goes on, yes, she does marry Ram, and yes, she recognizes him immediately, Sri Ram, as the person that she will unite with, this being. And together, they will create this Leela that's going to help all of us. She is able to advise him. They don't say this a lot, but Sri Ram was the dharmic king of Ayodhya, which is how he was born, and of course he's sent into exile. For those of you who don't know the story of the Ramayana, it really doesn't matter. But she is exiled. She decides to go with him, and with her being by his side, they were actually able to live and thrive in the forest because she knew how to live in that setting. She had a lot of other tasks in this Leela in terms of helping Ravana through whatever his karmic burden was that he was bearing in this lifetime, and he was acting out as a demon. And so while it may seem in certain texts that she was kidnapped and she was a victim and she was helpless, actually she knew what she had to do, and she knew what she had to do before it even happened, and so did Sri Ram. And in other versions of the Ramayana, some of you might have read as well, that she has to go through all kinds of trial by fire and so forth, and ultimately she goes back to live in the forest. But the way this story is told is that it was necessary for her to go back to the forest because of the imbalances. So the two of them, Sri Ram and Mata, they called her Mata, means mother, Mother Janaki, were essentially holding up the universe in the ways that they had to. Her way was as Shakti, as Mother Nature. His way was as a ruler, a king, a dharmic king. And they did this together whilst they were apart. So it's really, I find it a heartening story, telling of the story, because it really does speak to why it is I'm so pulled to this story, even though those words might not have been spoken in the original teachings. But by here, my feeling for it was so strong, she was able to just voice those feelings, and she's created a story. It's called The Untold Story of Sita by Dina Miriam, and her name is spelled as Denamerriam. So now that we've talked about that a little bit, let's just sing a little Sita Ram for a few minutes. And after that, I will chant another prayer that we can do together before Mirabai shares more of her beauty. So the words for this are very simple. It's Sita Ram. with me. Sita, Sita Ram, Sita Ram, Sita Ram. Sita, Sita Ram, Sita Ram, Sita Ram. Sita, Sita Ram, Sita Ram, Sita Sita, Sita Ram, Sita Ram, Sita Ram. 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 So the next chant we're going to sing, Sarina will put the words up in the chat. Specifically for honoring the Mother as Mother Earth. Bhumi is the word for earth, but earth means the stones, the trees, the animals, the sky, the atmosphere, everything around our planet and extending out into the universe. The words are Amma. Amma is a word for mother. We use this in the south of India, which is where I'm from. Anand is bliss, our innate nature. Dayini is the one who bestows this upon us and provides for us, seemingly without limits. Until we find maybe we've taken too much for balance to be out of balance. So we'll sing this for a few minutes. Jagatambe Janani Shima Jema 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 Jagatambe Janani Shima Jayama Bhumi Devi Ma Jayama Bhumi Devi Shima Jayama Bhumi Devi Jagatambe Janani Shri Jai Ma Jagatambe Janani Shri Jayama Bhumi Devi Bhumi Devi Shri Jayama Bhumi Devi. Mirabai.
Thank you, Nina. So allowing that chant to reverberate in every cell of our bodies, let's take a moment to sink back down into the silence for just a couple of minutes, allowing ourselves to feel deeply welcomed by our Mother, the Earth, at home in our own dear body. Feeling our roots extending from the base of our spine, intermingling with all the other root systems of life across this beautiful planet, weaving a basket of light, of rootedness, of connectedness, taking our place in this web of interbeing. And at the same time, feeling a gentle lifting from the crown of our heads, connecting us with the unseen realms, the abode of the ancestors, the angelic beings, all those who unconditionally love us and support us. Perfectly balanced now between the heavens and the earth, at home in the heart of the mother. Breathing in, breathing out. Through the heart, inhaling, lingering in the threshold between the breaths. Exhaling, radiating, lingering on the out breath. So I'd like to tell you another little story. This is the story of Rabia of Basra. Rabia was an 8th century Sufi mystic who lived in the ancient region of Mesopotamia, what's now known as Iraq. And she was born into a very poor family. So poor that eventually the 4 children, all daughters, were scattered. We don't know what happened. Did the parents die? Was it just through poverty? And Rabia found herself alone, wandering the region, and was easy prey for bandits and slave drivers. So she was sold into slavery, possibly sexual slavery. We don't know for sure. And like Hildegard of Bingen and Teresa of Avila, and probably you, Rabia had been connected to the sacred from a very young age. And the way she survived enslavement was by working her ass off all day and praying her heart out all night, which meant she pretty much didn't sleep. So the legend goes that one night, the person, her owner, the master of the household where she was, woke up in the night and there was this great light illuminating all the rooms of his house, of this large household. And he looked out his upper story window down into the courtyard, and that's where the light was coming from. And he saw Rabia, one of his slaves, praying, and she was prostrate on the ground in submission, and this light was leaping out of the top of her head and penetrating all of the corners of his household. Everything was illuminated. And she was crying out, Allah, Allah, Ishkala Mabudlela, God who is love, lover, and beloved, let me love only you. Well, the dude went back to bed, didn't know what to make of what he had just seen. But as he sat with this experience through the rest of the night, not sleeping himself, continuing to hear Rabia calling out to her beloved, he realized that this woman was a saint, and that the right thing to do would be to offer her her freedom, or to offer her the choice of her freedom, or that she could continue living in his household, and he and all who dwelled there would be her servants, and she could just give her life to God and they would support her. So in the morning, he approached Rabia. He told her what he had seen, and he gave her her two choices, and she chose freedom. And she went out into the desert. So it wasn't like she chose to set up a household with lots of comfortable, fun things to make up for lost time. She chose to plunge even deeper into the wilderness of this incarnation, of the human experience. And she spent, like Jesus did, and so many other wisdom beings, spent years living in the desert, living in the wilderness, in radical simplicity. It said that she had a brick that she carried for her pillow, a chipped jar that served both to carry water and to receive food. And what else did she have? A brick, a jar, one simple woven garment, and I think she had a basket of some kind. And people found her. They found her in the desert because she radiated, and she had this incredible wisdom, but the wisdom wasn't full of a lot of words. It was rooted in her beingness. And she was kind of the opposite of my namesake Mirabai, the 16th century Bhakti poet, who was an ecstatic. Of course, her ecstasy was intermingled with her agony of feeling separated from Krishna, the Lord of love. But Rabia was austere. She was non-dual. She did not believe there really was ultimately any separation between herself and the one she loved. And all she wanted was a naked encounter with reality itself. I'm going to read you just a couple of things from Rabia. She didn't write much, but she wrote a little bit. This is a wonderful book, Women of Sufism, A Hidden Treasure, edited by my friend Camille Helminski. I don't know if you can see that. There we go. Woman of Sufism, edited by Camille Helminski. Lots of wonderful stories and legends about Rabia in there, because again, it was kind of before history was written by the conquerors, so we don't know a lot about her life. This is probably her most famous poem. Oh, my beloved, if I worship you from fear of hell, burn me in hell. If I worship you from hope of paradise, bar me from its gates. But if I worship you for yourself alone, grant me then the beauty of your face. Oh, my beloved, if I worship you from fear of hell, burn me in hell. If I worship you from hope of paradise, bar me from its gates. But if I worship you for yourself alone, grant me then the beauty of your face. uncompromising, radical, raw, spiritual fire. Rabia. Your prayers were light. Your worship was rest. Your sleep an enemy of prayer. The days of your life a chance. Days pass and vanish slowly and perish. You are the companion of my heart. Though my body I offer to those who desire it. My body is friendly to guests, but you are the companion of my heart. You are the guest of my soul. Oh, my beloved, stars glitter and human eyes are closed. Kings lock their doors, and every lover is alone with love. Here, I am alone with you. So, those books, Women in Praise of the Sacred, edited by Jane Hirschfield. This one is the Shambhala Anthology of Women's Spiritual Poetry. Quite a treasure trove. As you can see, I have mini marked things here. Edited by Alaki Barnstone. And this one is The Dance of Bliss. It's another anthology of sacred poetry. I'll jot all these things in the chat box. Edited by Ivan Granger. Steadfast friend, you have hewn me through and through. When I speak, my every word speaks of you. And when silent, silently I ache for you. Steadfast friend, you have hewn me through and through. When I speak, my every word speaks of you. And when silent, I silently ache for you. I think that, oh my gosh, could it really be 4 o'clock already there in New York?
It is. But that's okay if you have something else you would like to share.
No, I think that the best thing to do now would be for us to dialogue a little, Nina, and also with our guests. Let's see.
Yeah. So for what would be, if any of you would like to ask a question, we can, Sarina, they can raise their hand, or what should we do?
I think we can do that. They should be able to virtually raise their hand. It's if they don't see the icon on the bottom of their screen, then click on participants. If you still don't see it, click on more. and it should say raise hand.
Yeah. So it's like a virtual, it's like a little hand like this.
Yeah.
And then if you raise your hand, then we'll call on you and you can unmute your mic. Anything you'd like to share with us would be great as well. While we're waiting for any of you to find the raise hand and raise your hand. If you don't find it, by the way, it's okay for you to just write the question in the chat to why don't you write it to Sarina, and then you can say whether it's for Mirabai or for me, and Sarina will say what the question is.
Also, Nina, can I just add one thing? That when you get the mic, if you would please just take a breath and try to distill your question or your reflection you're sharing to its essence, so that, because we're like over 70 people, so that everyone who would like to speak has a chance. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mirabai.
Nina, may I suggest something?
Yes, please, Sarina.
If they aren't able to raise their hand, they could just write to me in the chat saying they'd like to ask a question, and I can call on them.
Okay, fine. That sounds good. Yeah, that sounds good. And if for some reason they can't find the unmute mic and all that stuff, then they can just write the question. That's fine. But what you said is good.
Okay.
I want to just mention, since all of you have so generously contributed to these causes by just your presence, also just aligning our energy with Earth as best as we can in so many ways in our daily living. You know, all of you are, I'm sure, are aware of our global climate crisis, and that is due to many different things, and mostly due to our pollution of the atmosphere. But also bodies of water are polluted from our other pollution as well, dumping of industrial waste and that sort of thing. And also we've farmed our land beyond capacity at this point, almost, it feels like it. So there's a lot of work to do in this realm in terms of creating different energy sources for us, not taking fossil fuels from the ground and so forth, and creating alternative sources of energy. But more than anything, I think if we can even just preserve what we already have, there's nothing that's to be done. We don't have to create anything. All we have to do is just look in the direction of these sacred waters, and I'm talking about the ocean, rivers, lakes, that are full of incredible life and being, that though we don't see on a regular basis, are there and supporting this planet. Not just what's in the ocean, but it also supports everything that's on land, terrestrially, and in our atmosphere. Simple things like the balance of the temperature in the water will disturb the life and livelihood of the algae, which then affects the amount of moisture in the air, which then affects droughts and so forth. So it goes on. But even for simply the sake of the beauty, let's not even, if we can just understand that this is a gift for us. It's a gift, it's also where we live, and if we can connect with this beingness of the land, I think we'll be able to support the land better. And the three organizations that I've asked for these funds to be directed toward are, first is Sea Legacy. And Sea Legacy was co-created by a beautiful photographer. Her name is Christina Mittermeier. And I started to see her photographs on Instagram. She's a National Geographic photographer, as well as other places she's published, but she's also an incredible activist. She's from Mexico, so she has had to deal with all sorts of obstacles to find her way to be seen in so many different ways. So she has a lot of connection with indigenous people, but she's also spent numerous hours in freezing cold waters photographing the most beautiful underwater beings, and she shares them freely. But she's also part of an activist group that is trying to speak with the heads of many countries regarding drilling for fossil fuels in the Arctic. And that is our cooling system for this planet is in those ices. So we want to try to keep it as intact as possible. So Sea Legacy is one. The second one is very simple. It's our National Parks Foundation in this country. We are so fortunate that people had the foresight from Teddy Roosevelt onwards to create these incredible preserves of land and even marine areas that we have access to and we can spend time in, and it's not that expensive, it's accessible for people. So this is in the United States. And third is a cause that's very close to my heart, which is a saving of wild tigers in India, where a small country, relatively speaking, is supporting many, many people, and yet they've been able to provide the most viable habitat for wild tigers and all other animals that live in that habitat. And they have an idea to expand that even further because the land exists. We just have to use it the right way. And that is run by Saving Wild Tigers is my nonprofit that all funds go towards scientists who work on the ground in India. And in this case particularly, it will be Center for Wildlife Studies. That is now run by my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Kriti Karanth. She is a woman also doing this work in India with other female researchers. And I wanted to support them. So everything that you have given us today, Mirabai has so graciously also sharing, and we're going to send this all the way in the way of these three organizations. So I just wanted to let you know that. Okay, so Erin, I think she's coming in from Hawaii, unless she left Hawaii. Erin, do you want to unmute yourself? I see you. There you are.
Oh, aloha, Nina and Mirabai. What a treasure to behold of this magnificent time with you both. I think this is like out of all the things I've done on Zoom for 6 months now. Well, not to mention that my 6-year-old niece is here who's very devoted to being a cause in the world for good, and her mother, but to be together with all of you is just the greatest gift. Thank you. So my reflection about this, all of these gems that you both have offered today, the singing, the poetry, the wisdom, I'm having deep reflections of being a child and being really drawn constantly to the color green and to the prayers that I did as a child. My first reflection is that God did not have a face for me all the way. And even today, I have so many beautiful faces to call upon, from all of the Taras to Maharaji to Sri Siddhi Ma and our current goddesses. But I just wondered if anybody had that experience where, as a child, so many years, it's like I didn't so much resonate with a face. Mother Teresa was with me always from a child, and of course Jesus' picture was there. And but when I was deep in my deepest prayers as a young child, I would not see a face. That's my first question, or asking if anybody else had that. The second thing is that I'm wondering if Mirabai, if the poetry, her beautiful poetry and her very colorful, explicit words are the ones that she's speaking, or are they mixed with Saint Hildegard's words? I'm not clear on that. I'm not understanding that. So thanks for the time and the space.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, thank you, Erin. I'll just quickly answer that technical question. It was all Hildegard's words. When I was reading Hildegard, it was definitely Hildegard's words. But it's a valid question because, you know, I do with all my books, I intermingle my own reflections with the writings of the mystics that I'm writing about. So, but in this case, it was all Hildegard and it was all Rabia. The only thing that I wrote today that I read was the opening prayer, which I called Love Song to the Great Mother. Those were my words, but everything else were Rabia and Hildegard. Thanks for your beautiful sharings, Erin.
Mirabai, why don't you talk a little bit more about what she was asking about how she saw God, and also how you introduced this subject earlier on this evening about how everyone is a saint.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that?
Mm. So there's this current kind of attachment to this idea of non-duality being the only thing that's real, right? This comes to us from Tantra in, you know, India, and also the Advaita Vedanta tradition of non-duality. And we get this idea that the non-dual or the formless is that which is real, and that all of this form is an illusion, is Maya. And this is reinforced by the teachings of many traditions, Eastern and Western, so-called Eastern and Western. But there's something about the feminine heart, I think, that knows that both are true. Like that we are, of course, we're not separate from the one we love and that we yearn for, that we always have been and ever shall be one with the one. And that all this experience of multiplicity or the illusion of separation from God is something to be awoken from, yes. And also, sorry, I've got my dog's choking, and that also here on earth, all of this glorious multiplicity is the place where the sacred lives and abides, and we, through each other, we experience the holy. Because the transcendent version, the formless, is not always accessible, and that we're incarnated for such a short time. This precious human birth is an opportunity, as Ram Dass says, this is our curriculum. And the primary essence of our curriculum is alleviating suffering wherever we can, for each other and for the earth and for all who dwell here. So I think that yes, God has no face, and yes, God's face is your face, is all of our faces. And I think about the prophets, you know, that in the biblical tradition, there were these certain prophets, mostly men, who were called to step up and speak truth to power and to wake us out of our illusion of separation and all of that. But that the women prophets, like Miriam, the sister of Moses, who's considered to kind of be the first, in a way, the most important of the prophets, Miriam understood that the prophetic reality can only arise in all of us, responding to the call to care for God among us. And I'll try to make this really brief, but so when Miriam was completely connected to the earth in her prophetic response. You know, she was marginalized as the sister of Moses, but she was a key player, and her prophetic experience was all about the stuff of the earth, a baby, a raft that was woven, or a basket out of willow fibers and sealed with sap, all of these earthy things, right? Sent down a river, the river of, you know, in India, the river is the goddess. And that baby was found by who? A young woman bathing naked with other young women, like all of these earthy connected things. And then the mother who had to send her baby away because otherwise he would have been killed, pretends to just appear on the scene. And Miriam says, oh, look, my mother, because it was her mother too, Moses's mother and her mother, Yocheved, it lost a baby, because this is a time when boys were killed. So she happens to have milk. She can nurse this baby. So the deception had to do with nursing and nurturing and secreting this child, who then grew up in the household of the Pharaoh. So the point is that women, or the feminine in all of us, people of all genders, gets that the prophet isn't some rare, exceptional white male being, but is all of us. We are all prophets, and we're all mystics, and we're all saints. And we have to just bring whatever we have to the table of this starving human condition and offer it, and not wait for some kind of masculine paradigm of awakening to be able to step up in this world. And I'm going to stop talking now. Thank you.
I'll just add one little thing, Erin, which is that I identify with what you're saying in the sense that from a young age, I have a very distinct memory, and I'm sure probably everybody on this call has this as well, of having an awareness of presence with a capital P. And without fully understanding or trying to analyze what it was, I felt welcomed by it, and it was a feeling of entering into a particular kind of space that was holding. So there was no face, there was no name attached to it. And I never really thought about it very much, except when I look back on my life now, I see the road that I took to get to here in terms of my exploration of spiritual stuff, so to speak. So thank you for sharing that. Mm-hmm. And I will ask Claire. Claire, do you want to unmute?
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Hi, Claire.
Down the road. Thank you so much, both of you, the chanting and talking. It's just so beautiful. I don't even know how to respond to it, but I'm just taking it in. I had 40 was not my major awakening. My major started around 34 when a dear friend passed. And then I had darshan with Maharaji. And then now again, I just turned 61. At 60, breakup of a 21-year relationship. Very complicated. But at any rate, yesterday I saw a hawk out my window. 2 feet away, and it was very profound to me. Cooper's hawk, I've been told. And I've just been thinking about this hawk. I have my own theories on what he or she, I'm hoping it was a she, is about. But I just wondered, I feel like to me it was Nimkroli Baba Maharaji for various reasons. But I wonder, Mirabai or Nina, if you have any awareness of hawks and what they might mean. So it was a beautiful afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Claire. I feel like I did too much talking before, so Nina, do you have any hawk response? But Claire, do you know about Elaine Sutton and her poetry? Yeah. My friend Elaine Sutton, who died a couple of years ago, she wrote this beautiful book called A Reckless Insistence on Beauty. I'll put it in the chat box. And there is an incredible hawk story in there that I think you will love and relate to.
Okay.
I'm gonna write that in now. A Reckless Insistence on Beauty. Okay. Thank you, dear Claire.
So, Claire, in the Indian tradition, I don't know very much about a particular message that a hawk might bring. However, the hawk plays a big role, and as do some other birds like swans, peacocks, vultures even. They end up being the vehicle of the deities. And in the Indian stories we hear of Garuda, who actually appears in many sacred texts and actually even will transmit messages and teachings. So Other than that, though, it's always exciting to see a hawk. I think that they fly so high, as do vultures. They have a pretty good view of everything that's going on. And I think that if we even make ourselves aware of such a being, any being, we are already then finding that connection to what it is that we need. So any being of beauty, whether it's a flower or a hummingbird or a hawk, that's meaningful to you. But I'm going to look up and see if I can find anything else about hawks in particular.
I've been reading a lot about them since the past 24 hours, and they're very connected toward it in many practices toward the spirit world. So I'd be curious if you find more stories.
Yeah, I might look more in some of the native teachings from this land. I think there is a lot from the original people. So we'll look into it together. So Mirabai, do you have any closing words? And if not, please do. And I will just end with a very simple chant for today, also saying that Sarina and I will get to everybody a recording of this program. Most likely it'll come to you after election day. Yeah.
Excuse me, Nina, I have 2 comments in the chat.
Sure. Tell me.
The first one is a message for Mirabai from Victoria Anderson. She says, I just want to thank Mirabai for writing Our Lady of Guadalupe, Devotions, Prayers, and Living Wisdom. Our Lady has been a focal point for the women in my family. My grandmother was so devoted to her. I recently picked up this book while cleaning, and I've connected with her again, and I'm reminded of her importance.
Thank you. And Nina's showing a beautiful Guadalupe right now. Thank you so much for that.
And one more. This is from Jennifer O'Connell. She says, Mirabai, thank you so much for what you have shared. You mentioned that there was a similar period of denial of inherent truths. You said dryness by these female saints, which was shattered around the Middle Age. What more can you say about this topic? I'd love to hear more about this from your perspective. And also, I would love to do this again. This format is perfect with you and Nina.
Thank you, Serena. Also, thank you, Serena, because you have been holding us behind the scenes so elegantly, as always. I'm deeply grateful. And I think Nina and I really love doing this, so I have a feeling it's going to happen again. And what I'm hearing from that is maybe really something about navigating darkness and aridity, what John of the Cross calls the aridity, the arid desert spaces, when we're not feeling it, we're not feeling connected to spirit, our belief systems are crumbling and there's nothing to take their place, that those desert periods are deeply important in the lives of all awakening beings, that it can't always be juicy and plugged in. In fact, it is in those dark and dry spaces that the deeper work, often the most profound transformational work, is happening. So I'm hearing that, and Nina, I'm sure you're hearing it too, and maybe we can do another gathering that honors the desert in some way, those desert spaces.
Sounds good.
All right, so I'm going to end my part with this very little tiny piece by Hildegard from Symphonia, and then pass it to you, Nina. Alleluia. Light burst from your untouched womb like a flower on the farther side of death. The world tree is blossoming. 2 realms become one.
Thank you so much, Mirabai. I hope I'll be able to come and see you in New Mexico soon. You too, Claire. Yeah.
Me too.
Okay, so why don't we just close with the same chant that we started with? And I offer the merits of all our practice to the Divine One. As we sit here together, we recall all the ancestors, as Mirabai said, and even those who are to come. As I sit here, I recall Sri Siddhima, my guru. She was always so connected with everything that was happening around us, within our hearts, but also in the environment. She would be sitting in the garden. Often I'd see her in the morning and she'd just be listening to the birds. She knew exactly how the weather was going to affect us. And she would say, wear this, wear that, don't eat this, do that. So in tune, so aligned. May we be so. Sarva mangala shive sarvārtha sādhike sharanye tryambake gauri nārāyani namo stute sarva mangala shive sarvārtha sādhike sharanye tryambake gauri nārāyani namo stute Narayani Namaste. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Sarva mangalam. May all things be auspicious. Thank you all again. We're so happy to have spent this afternoon with you, right, Mirabai?
Oh, so happy.
Yeah.
I just feel like a different person.
And thank you to Sarina. She's always holding my hand. And please, if you feel like you'd like to, turn on your camera, turn on your mic, and say goodbye as you leave. We'd love to see your faces. See you soon.
Om Shanti.
Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaste.
That was
Thank you.
beautiful.
Thank
Namaste.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Namaste.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Namaste. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Namaste. Thank you.
Adios.
Thank you so much. Many blessings to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Love to all.
4. Yeah. Bye, Erin. Thank you so much for joining. Be well in Hawaii.
Until February,
Okay, great.
then New Hampshire. Hope to see you very soon, both Nina, hope to see you, and Mirabai.
Lots of love.
Thank you, Nina. I love you.
Love you
Thank
too. Bye, Barbara. See you soon.
Nibe kisage go kimi kwechueni go kishaweni go 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 Nibe kisage